Hey everybody, what's up? Aaron here, Question Period Canada. Trudeau's gonna be in the House, I do know that, so who knows where the questions are gonna lead? Think he's gonna give any answers? I guess we'll wait and see. Should be an exciting episode of Question Period Canada. Things are heating up on Parliament Hill. All the politicians are more agitated than they used to be. Tough times out there for Canadians, I guess. Let's drop right into it.
I'd like to thank all members for
just get this
allowing
episiev
our
going.
colleague to do that.
Oral questions.
Oral questions. Here we go.
Here we go.
Yeah. Poilievre is always up first.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister, we know that he's just not worth the cost. Now we have a Scotiabank report stating that government deficit spending, which is mainly the federal government, has increased interest rates by 2%. That's $700 a month for the average mortgage. That's $8,400 a year for the average family, just in additional interest rates, because of deficits mainly caused by this Prime Minister. Will he present a plan today to balance the budget and reduce interest rates so Canadians can keep their homes? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know what the Conservative Party's approach is: austerity and cuts. We, on the other hand, are investing in housing. We are investing to ensure that Canadians find life more affordable. We know that this is a difficult period for Canadians, but the solution is not austerity and cuts. It is strategic investments to support families, to create the jobs of tomorrow, and to build hundreds of thousands of new housing units in the years to come.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm being invested in.
Austerity and cuts are exactly what Canadian families are living today. 7 million of them are cutting meals because they can't afford food prices after he's inflated them. And many are cutting homes and forced to live in tents because mortgage rates have risen so fast under this Prime Minister's deficit. Scotiabank now calculates government deficits are adding 2 full percentage points to the rates. That's $700 per month in higher mortgage payments. Next year, $900 billion, the next 3 years, $900 billion of new mortgages, or 2/3 will come up for renewal. We risk a massive default crisis. Will the Prime Minister announce a plan to balance the budget to bring down mortgage rates so Canadians can keep their homes?
I'm terrified for my next mortgage rate. I've got 2 years left on this one, and it's not going to be good.
Mr. Speaker, we've seen this movie before. The Conservative politician's approach to facing challenges is always cuts and austerity. He recognizes, like we all do, that Canadians are facing difficult times, and his solution is for the federal government to do less, to invest less in Canadians, to be there less to support Canadians. That is not what we're going to do, Mr. Speaker. Over the past number of months, we've announced the construction over 100,000, 200,000 homes across the country. We're delivering support for people in buying groceries with greater competition, and we're moving forward with clean jobs into the future, whether it's manufacturing with Stellantis or Volkswagen, whether it's resources. We're moving forward to support workers.
The Stellantis thing, I'm guessing, will be a big issue today. Battery plant.
What we're proposing is for the
computer
government, the federal government,
battery
to
car,
do
EV vehicle?
less damage and cost less money so that Canadians don't have to live in austerity and cuts like they are today. Today we found out that rent rose faster in October than in any month in 40 years. The Prime Minister's solution to that? Quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple the carbon tax?
Makes no sense.
Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister announce in an hour in his fall economic statement that he's gotten a little bit of common sense, that he's going to cancel the quadrupling and cap the tax until the carbon tax election, when I will win and axe the tax altogether?
Wow, when I win the election and I axe the tax altogether. That's a good line.
Mr. Speaker, our solution to Canadians who are having trouble affording housing is to build more housing, is to invest in working with municipalities to unlock more homes built, to bring down rents. These are the investments we're making. But, Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that the Leader of the Opposition talks about the damage we're doing to Canada by delivering $10 a day childcare, the damage we're doing to Canada by delivering dental care to kids who can't afford it, the damage we're doing to Canada by continuing to step up for seniors by protecting their pensions. If that's damage, then we really see what the Conservative leader is made of.
I understand that childcare is very important. I don't happen to have children, though,
Leader of the Opposition.
and I'm paying for
Prime
the
Minister
$10
is forcing
daycare.
Canadians
That's the
to
thing.
give $15 billion to one battery plant that we now learn is going to employ 1,600 foreign workers with Canadian tax dollars. Now, $15 billion works out to $1,000 in federal taxes for every single family in Canada. You would think that he would read the contract he signed with this multinational company. And if he did, can he tell us the section in that contract that limits the number of foreign workers that get Canadian tax dollars?
That's a lot of money going towards like a company that's going to be run in our country,
Mr. Speaker,
but
it is
the
even
employees
for
are going to
having
be
watched this,
South Korean.
Leader of the Opposition in his almost 20-year political career, it is still astonishing to see the way he will choose to use any misinformation to score political points. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, he opposes the investments in manufacturing in Canada. He opposes the Stellantis deal to create EV batteries. He opposes the Volkswagen deal that's going to create up to 30,000 direct and indirect jobs in St. Thomas. He continues to stand against a plan to grow great jobs into a net zero future, and he'll use any fake excuse to try and advance that cause.
I don't know. One of these guys is coming off more fake than the other.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister has spread nothing but disinformation on these very
going at it
projects.
today, guys.
He was billions of dollars in underestimating the original cost before the shovels were even in the ground. He claimed the thing would pay itself back in 5 years. Now we know it's 20. And now we've learned that the majority of the jobs are going to go to foreign workers. That's right. Struggling single moms and seniors will pay $1,000 in taxes, mostly to pay the wages of foreign workers who will not even keep the money here. Why does he so thoroughly disdain and disrespect Canadian workers that he wants to send their money to another country?
Don't think we're going to get a straight answer on that question.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that is flat out false, and it is a kind of fear-mongering from the Leader of the Opposition. Canadians are seeing almost every single day. Mr. Speaker, these are thousands of good jobs for Canadians because this government has stepped up to reinvest in manufacturing. After decades, after years of neglect under a Conservative government, we are stepping up to deliver for Canadians. We are delivering a strong future into a net zero world, and this Leader of the Opposition is wanting to take us back to the Stone Age.
Back to the Stone Age. I find often, though, when somebody brings up fear-mongering, they're actually trying to fear-monger.
The Honourable Member for Chambly. Mr. Speaker, Quebec and Canada are facing major economic issues, and that's doubtless why we're having an economic update.
How's it going in Quebec?
Before going to speak to Quebec seniors or Quebec Chambers of Commerce, will the Prime Minister confirm today that the economic update will explicitly include an increase in old age security and an extension in the period for reimbursing COVID loans to small businesses? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for 8 years we have been there for seniors with investments to increase their pension, to help the most vulnerable seniors, with programs that have delivered help and support for seniors in their communities. We've invested in housing for seniors. We will keep being there for seniors. And during COVID, we were there to support small business, to help entrepreneurs. We will continue to be there, and I'm looking forward to sharing the content of the fall economic update with my colleague, but he will still have to wait a few hours.
Playing a little joke with his
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly.
watch, or his wrist for his watch. Knows what time it is.
Sometimes I wonder if I should send the Prime Minister my questions in advance, because then maybe the answer would have something to do with my question. So if I'm understanding what he's saying, there won't be more money for seniors, and that there won't be anything for the tens of thousands of businesses which may have to close due to the consequences of the pandemic. Perhaps the government is afraid that it won't have enough money. But then I have an idea. Why not just cut subsidies to oil companies so that it can support seniors and businesses?
I like the sound of that. Why do oil companies get these huge subsidies?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'll be very happy to send a schedule to the leader of the Bloc Québécois to tell him that the economic update will be shared at 4 o'clock this afternoon. It will be shared with the House of Commons and Canadians. Then the Bloc Québécois can ask whatever they like about it. But I will say that help for seniors, Canadians, housing, cost of living assistance, investments in a more prosperous economy in a changing world, those are all things that will be in the update. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with my colleagues.
He's become such a politician. He's so fake.
When the Prime Minister announced the Stellantis battery
Speaking
plant
of
in
fake.
Windsor, he said this would be good jobs for a generation of Canadians. Now we're learning that there's potentially a secret deal for 1,600 foreign workers. So when the Prime Minister made this announcement, was it just a photo announcement, or was it really a plan to create jobs for Canadians? And will the Prime Minister make this deal public so Canadians can find out whether he broke yet another promise?
How many bulletproof vests is he wearing under that coat?
The
Looks
Right
like a
Honourable
couple.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know nobody in this House was surprised that the Leader of the official opposition fell prey to disinformation and choosing to attack the Stellantis deal. But it's disappointing to see the NDP leader anchored in the community of Windsor speaking out against this Stellantis deal based on nothing but rumors and disinformation. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is thousands upon thousands of good jobs for Canadians, good jobs that will grow the local economy, will contribute to our battery and manufacturing supply chain in Canada. This is a good deal for Canada. Everyone should get behind it, especially people who care about Windsor.
Such a used car salesman. Nothing against used car
The
salesmen. I
honourable
didn't
member
mean
from
that.
Burnaby
but
South.
you know what I mean.
If the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, then just make the deal public. Canadians will know.
Loblaws and Metro have just
Jake Mead's the only
announced
one that
much
does
higher
this,
profits
where
than
he
last year.
speaks in one
At a
language
time
and
when
then
1
in
out of 10
mid-question
Quebecers is having
changes.
to go to food banks.
No, rarely other people
This
do it.
morning,
Not very often.
We learned that grocery inflation has been higher than general inflation for the 23rd consecutive month.
Yeah, this, I don't know if that's true.
Will
but
the Prime Minister
it's not
announce
good
the
if it is.
measures to increase competition that we've been asking for today? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have been concerned about grocery prices for some time. That is why both the Minister and the Parliamentary Committee have brought in the heads of the grocery chains and have spoken with them to stabilize grocery prices. We know that it's important that we be here to support Canadians with the cost of living, and I can assure my colleagues that in our fall economic statement that we will table shortly, there will be measures to further increase grocery competition to help people be able to make ends meet and support their families during this difficult time.
They've had a chance to get the
The
grocery
honourable
prices
member
under
from
control
Calgary
for,
Forest
like, this
Law.
isn't
After
the,
the
they said
finance
23
minister
months in a
promised
row.
to balance the budget in her false hopes update, then did a massive flip-flop and promised to balance the budget in the year never. The Prime Minister did a massive flip-flop recently too on his carbon tax scam, where he gave a temporary carve-out for Canadians in Atlantic Canada. That's 3% of Canadians, whereas poll numbers were tanking. After 8 years, this Liberal NDP government are not worth the cost, and they still plan on quadrupling it. Why don't they pause quadrupling the carbon tax in today's failing economic update and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
I find Jaz Raj is one of the better speakers. Like, very seldom uses paper, and his words are always smooth.
Resources, Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable colleague often neglects
He's going to say the
mention a
exact
whole
same
range
thing
of
as he
important
says every
facts.
time.
The price on pollution is an important
He's gonna say
component
8 out of
of
10.
a broad
That's
approach
to
to
say 8 out of
fighting
10.
climate change. It is done in a manner that addresses affordability concerns. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money
Every
back
time.
than they pay. With respect to home heating
I don't
oil,
believe
it is
that.
a specific case. We are focused on ensuring we're doing it in a manner that will help us to drive the fight against climate change while ensuring affordability for Canadians. It is a responsible and thoughtful approach to public policy, something that we never hear from the Conservatives.
Not to criticize Jonathan too much, but he gives the exact same answer every time. I've cottoned onto the same.
Canada's best
There's a few
climate
of them.
change plan is going to be a change in government under the common sense Conservative leader as Prime Minister. 2 million Canadians going to a food bank in a single month. 1 in 5 are skipping meals. Food inflation out of control. Failed woke policies are like the carbon tax are driving up the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. While these Liberal NDP government continue to miss every single climate change target that they set for themselves, and Canadians get less in these phony rebates. And they still plan on quadrupling it. So why don't they put the pause on quadrupling the carbon tax and go to election so Canadians can decide on the carbon tax themselves?
Go to an election. That's a good idea. Let people think that they have some control over this. I know we really don't, but it would be nice, the idea of having control.
For Canadians across this country, but particularly in Ontario, when we hear the words common sense and conservatives, we get the shivers. Because we remember the time when they cut services to education, when they cut services to healthcare, when they cut important services for water that led to deaths in Walkerton, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we hear common sense conservatives, we know that means cuts for Canadians, harms to Canadians, and nothing good comes of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Central
The summits are a
Okanagan,
bad idea. I'm with you on that, Mubu,
Nicola.
for sure.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, grocery and home heating bills continue to rise, as do rent and mortgage payments. Scotiabank has said that inflationary government deficits are to blame. If our deficit maker-in-chief was to show fiscal responsibility, it would drop interest rates by 2% and save the average family $700 a month off their mortgage. Does the Prime Minister understand that his deficits are making it difficult for people to afford basic necessities like food and housing, or does he think that all Canadians are auditioning for Les Mis?
He was making a joke there. Some of the jokes hit, some of them don't.
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Oh, no.
Speaker. I would like
One
to
of the worst.
remind the member opposite and perhaps inform the House that this morning Statistics Canada indicated that inflation has dropped yet again in this country. It is now at 3.1%. Mr. Speaker, Canada continues to have the lowest deficit among all G7 countries. And with respect to the report that my honourable colleague cites, that report indicates that it is actually provincial spending, not federal, and COVID supports that are the result of the statistics that he's citing, Mr. Speaker. The facts are important.
Such confidence, it's arrogance, though. I don't know, something about Bendayan I have trouble with.
Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, if we all quiet down, you can already hear the fiscal engines in the background starting to rev up, as the only solution for inflationary spending for this Prime Minister is more inflationary spending. The Conservative leader has challenged the Prime Minister to stop his carbon tax hikes, reduce his deficits, and build homes, not bureaucracy. Will they address these issues in their mini-budget today, or will they reject this common sense plan and show that the only thing that isn't subject to rising inflation in Canada is the competence of this NDP Liberal government?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister stated just a few moments ago, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance will be tabling the fall economic statement at 4 p.m. in this House. All members, including the member opposite, will have a chance to look at all of the numbers, and we will have a chance in this House to debate the economic plan that our government has put forward, Mr. Speaker. I would remind the member opposite, when he talks of deficit, that Canada continues to have the lowest deficit among all G7 countries, and we will continue to be fiscally responsible.
Her cheeks are like shiny.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of inflationary Liberal spending, This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost for Quebecers. Quebec's October inflation was still the worst in Canada at 4.2%. Scotiabank experts have calculated that government overspending has added 2% to interest rates in Canada. That's $700 a month more for mortgages.
That's so much money.
Will the Liberal Prime Minister announce a plan today to balance the budget in today's mini-budget so that interest rates can come down and Canadians and Quebecers can keep their homes?
Good question. It's not going to happen, though. We're not going to wake up tomorrow and find out our interest rates dropped by 2%.
Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, the fall economic update will be tabled at 4 in a very short time, and then our honorable colleague will be able to look at the numbers, but I can confirm immediately that Canada will continue to have the lowest deficit in the G7. And we will continue to be fiscally responsible.
Oh, it's G7 stuff. I bet you every country in the G7 says that they're best in the G7 in their government house.
To the data we've seen, rent prices have risen by more than 9% in Quebec over the past year. In the Journal de Montréal, we read about a 30-year-old man who was preparing to spend his first winter on the street with nowhere to call home. After 8 years of inflationary liberal spending, it's hard to understand why the Bloc Québécois wants 2 more years of this and also to radically increase the carbon tax. The Bloc Québécois wants the balance of power, not a balanced budget. Does the Prime Minister have the Bloc say so to continue irresponsibly spending billions of dollars? Or will he finally listen to conservative common sense and balance the budget?
Which coalition government do you prefer less? The NDP Liberal coalition government or the Bloc Liberal coalition?
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are telling us that they care about Canadians, but they don't seem to give a fig about what's happening. They don't seem to care about the flooding, the heavy rains, the wildfires everywhere. They don't seem to care at all. They want to cut money to fight climate change. They want to make us back up and keep backing up with cuts and austerity, but we will not be dragged back into the Stone Age. The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord.
What about the Stone Age? We're all starving and freezing.
Radio-Canada's revelation that Mexican drug cartels are trafficking people across Canada's border is very serious. The federal government cannot allow criminal groups to exploit migrants, and that's not all. The RCMP has confirmed that the crossings used by the cartels for human trafficking are the very same ones that are used for weapons and drug trafficking. Needless to say, the federal government cannot allow Mexican cartels to set up shop here. When will the government regain control of the border?
This is an interesting question that was brought up yesterday.
The Honourable Minister of
I don't know
Public
much
Safety.
about that issue in Quebec.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my colleague. We cannot accept cartels taking control of the border, but we should also avoid exaggerating in the question. Mr. Speaker, our government is concerned about what Radio-Canada reported, and that's exactly why we will be working more closely with our law enforcement services, with border services, and, very importantly, with our American partners in order to fight exactly what my colleague is talking about. I believe in the hard work of border services and the RCMP. The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, it's not my question that was exaggerated. It's the negligence of this government. Cartels don't just facilitate crime at the border, they are directly involved in crime in Quebec. Radio-Canada has revealed that South Americans who entered the country with fake Mexican passports have organized a network of burglaries in Quebec.
Is this going on?
The Montreal
Probably.
Police, they come to the country for the sole purpose of robbing people. Mr. Speaker, the Montreal Police have even said that Quebec is an easy target because of these loopholes at the border. So my question is simple. What is the federal government doing to regain control of the border?
Yeah, I'm going to have to investigate that issue because if I'm covering this, I need to know more than I do
Minister
about
of
that.
Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to fight organized crime. We will do so on many fronts simultaneously. We have invested $400 million more in our law enforcement agencies, the border services, the RCMP, to give them the tools they need to work with their Quebec and U.S. partners in order to fight the arrival of organized crime. My colleague knows very well that I spoke about it with Minister Bonnardel in Quebec. We will continue to work with Quebec and our U.S. partners because we take this threat very seriously.
I don't know.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean.
Seems like they don't take any
Mr.
threats
Speaker, the federal government
seriously.
cannot keep letting the cartels exploit migrants. It can't
That's a
allow
dark
them to
code.
spread misinformation on social networks in order to extract thousands of dollars from these disadvantaged people. It can't let them place people at risk of imprisonment in Canada or in the US. As we speak, vulnerable people are making their way to Canada on the basis of lies, and they're getting robbed and arrested. When will the government finally put an end to this exploitation?
Harry Potter,
The
that
Honourable
guy.
Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we completely share these concerns about the exploitation of migrants. The Prime Minister raised matters of irregular migration with the President of Mexico. My colleague, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, has also discussed these matters with her counterparts in the US and Mexico. And I myself had that discussion with my American counterparts in order to ensure that all possible measures will be taken in order to prevent exactly what my colleague just spoke about.
The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
The Prime Minister promised to
Okay,
make housing
she went a
more
couple times
affordable for
yesterday.
Canadians, but we know that wasn't totally true. After 8 years of this Liberal government, rent has doubled, housing prices have skyrocketed. In fact, they've doubled as well. And mortgage payments, of course, have gone through the roof. In fact, today, Scotiabank confirmed that mortgage rates have increased by 2% just due to this government's overspending. No other factors considered, just this government's overspending. Mortgage rates have gone up by 2%, which means on average $700 a month extra on a family's mortgage. When will this government do the responsible thing, rein in their spending, so that Canadians can afford to put a roof over their head?
Yeah, she went a couple times yesterday at Sean Fraser.
For Housing,
That's
Infrastructure
who's
and
probably going to
Communities.
answer. Yeah, Sean.
Mr. Speaker, in order to address the national housing crisis, we're making the investments necessary to get Canada building again. And I have good news for my colleague. It is working. When we look at the Statistics Canada report from yesterday, we see significant increases in the investments in residential construction. In fact, the heading of the section from the report is entitled Strong Gains in Residential Investment, indicating a nearly 8% increase just this past month. We have a plan to continue to cut costs for home builders and to make the investments necessary to get the homes built that the economy and that families who live in it need.
We'll see. I
The
think
Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
Rachel Thomas will
I'm
be
not
back.
sure what Liberal report the Honourable Member is reading from, but the stat is this. Actually, fewer homes are being built, and investment in the market is down by 14% for new construction. So that's the fact. And out of that, then, rent is doubling for Canadians, mortgages are skyrocketing, and housing prices have also doubled. Canadians can't afford to house themselves. In fact, their mortgage rates are up on average by $700 a month, and that is only due to this government's overspending. Just due to their overspending alone, $700 a month. No other factors considered, just their overspending. When will they rein it in, do the responsible thing, and allow Canadians to afford a roof over their head?
It's good. She did well.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to my honourable colleague, she just does not have her numbers right. She is entitled to her own opinion, but certainly not to her own facts. I will tell you specifically what the Stats Canada, which is not some Liberal organization, it operates independently. They indicated this month investment in residential building went up 7.3%. Single-family home investment increased 6.4%. Multi-unit construction rose 8.2%. Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives are concerned about the housing crisis, why are they committing to cut funding for home building and to raise taxes on home builders?
Dancing clown
The
right
Honourable
there,
Member
folks.
from Edmonton Riverbend.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister,
We don't see
rent has
Matt General
doubled,
very
house
often.
prices have doubled, and mortgage payments are up 150%. Just now, Statistics Canada shows that investment in housing construction is down 14%. Turns out that photo ops with a housing minister in hard hats don't actually build homes.
Photo ops.
Who knew? Will the government end their photo ops so Canadians can get houses built?
Yeah, we don't see him very often.
The Honourable Minister for Housing.
Albertan,
Mr.
right?
Speaker, I find it fascinating
laughing.
when there are accusations about using photo ops for political gain, when the leader of the Conservative Party, when he was a minister, actually violated election rules for a photo op where he showed up wearing a Conservative Party logo on behalf of the government of Canada. Mr.
Making
Speaker,
pot
with
shots.
respect to my honourable colleague, he has the facts wrong. Stats Canada is indicated that we are actually seeing
These
an
are low
increase
blows.
in housing investments when it comes to the residential sector.
Politics
Housing
are
starts are up. In fact, we are on pace to build more than 50,000 additional homes over and above
Look at
the
Randy
record
Bossino
that the
laughing.
Conservatives achieved while they were in government.
The honourable member from Edmonton Riverbend.
Mr. Speaker, you know what, Mr. Speaker? When the Conservative leader was Minister of
The
Housing,
general
a
is
typical
pretty
family
smooth.
home costs only $450,000. Investment in housing construction is down 14% under this minister. Rent has doubled, house prices have doubled, and mortgage payments are up 150%. Again, will the government end their photo op so Canadians can get houses built?
Gotta say though, the Conservatives got to go easy on the photo ops because they take advantage. They're politicians. Everyone does it. Sit down and shut up, Greg.
I'm going to ask all members
getting
please
old,
to
bud.
keep your voices down, to take your microphone when the speaker recognizes you, to either ask or to answer a question. The Honourable
Greg's too
Government
much.
House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that the Conservatives like to make up facts, but I didn't realize that they were trying to make a new way of doing math. When Statistics Canada says that housing starts are up 7%, that does not equal a decrease of 14%. I would encourage the members opposite to look at the Stats Canada report, but we understand that they don't have a lot of respect for Stats Can because it was them when they were in government that cut the long-form census because they don't like to make policy based on data because then they can actually realize that they're making bad policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Karina's pretty sharp today. She can often put you to sleep, like with this low voice and slow talking.
The Honourable
A little bit of
member
fire
from
today.
Edmonton Griesbach.
What do we got?
Mr. Speaker, Canada's public service
Blake.
workers stepped up during the pandemic and every day since to deliver the critical services Canadians rely on. How does this government thank them? With a disastrous rollout to a new healthcare plan. Workers are paying thousands of dollars out of pocket for their medication, healthcare, and wait months to be reimbursed, forcing families to make impossible decisions. The Liberals' lack of urgency to act just shows how out of touch they are. When will the government stop delaying and fix this mess so workers can have the benefits they earned?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker,
Oh, no.
Canada's public servants and their families deserve to have access to their benefits as quickly as possible. I have been in close touch with the supplier and have ensured that the supplier will agree to bringing down call wait times to between 5 to 10 minutes by December 31st, opening call centers on weekends, as well as introducing escalation processes for those who aren't served well. Mr. Speaker, we will always make sure that Canada's public servants are reimbursed for their benefits. We are grateful for their service every single day. Thank you.
Her thank you at the end there, like,
The Honourable Member
I think
from
that she's a
Timmins,
bit of
James
a...
Bay.
So we're getting the
Oh,
fall
yeah.
economic
It's kinda funny.
update from the government today. Well, let me give an update from small businesses in Northern Ontario. I mean, first they got hammered by the pandemic, then they got hammered by high inflation. Now they're being hammered by Liberal indifference. And if the Prime Minister doesn't change course on the CEBA repayments, many of our businesses are going to be forced to close their doors in January. So will the Prime Minister do the right thing and extend the loan repayment deadline so that we can have our small businesses get back on their feet?
If anybody knows about getting hammered, it possibly could be Charlie Angus. That's a bit of a low blow, but he's a funny guy. He's a funny politician.
We know times are tough and still tough for small businesses. If they are unable to repay by January 18, they still have a full 3 years to repay their CEBA loan. We extended the term loan repayment deadline to make sure that small businesses are able to focus on navigating pandemic recovery. We are also cutting taxes for growing small businesses and lowering credit card fees by up to a quarter. We will always be there for small businesses, Mr. Speaker, and that will never change.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Pension Plan is a key pillar in the federal government's commitment to support Canadians in their retirement. Residents in my province are worried about the attack it's facing. But even more alarming is the official opposition's continued silence on the issue.
Can the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages tell us what our government is doing to protect Alberta pensions and ensure that the Canada Pension Plan we have all paid into is there for people in retirement?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for Calgary Skyview for his question and his hard work. Albertans must speak up on this matter. As a federal government, Mr. Speaker, we will always protect the pensions of Albertans and to fight the reckless and risky proposal of Alberta Conservatives to pull Albertans out of the CPP. Every member in this House should be defending the CPP, but Mr. Speaker, what do we hear from Alberta Conservatives? Silence, zero, zilch, and their silence speaks volumes about their unwillingness to protect Albertans and their pensions. We will stick up for Albertans every day and for the Canada Pension Plan. They can do whatever they want. We got the backs of Canadians.
Randy's a funny little guy. Like, I get a kick out of him for some reason.
The Honourable Member from Kenora.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, we know
Malilo.
this Prime Minister
Eric
is not worth the cost. He's planning to quadruple the carbon tax on gas, groceries, and home heating, but our common sense plan is to axe the tax to bring home lower prices. Mr. Speaker, today the government has an opportunity. Will they include in today's mini budget a plan to finally stop their carbon tax hikes?
Very calm voice,
The
Eric
Honourable Minister
Malilo.
for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Party pretends to
He'll say
offer
the 8
certain
out of 10.
principles, and
8
if you
out of
don't
10
like those,
homes
they
get
have
a
other
rebate.
In their 2008 platform, and I quote, "We will work to develop and implement a North America-wide cap-and-trade system for greenhouse gases and air pollution." In their 2021 platform that they all ran on, they said, and I quote, "We recognize that the most efficient way to reduce our emissions is the use of pricing mechanisms." My goodness, given the flip-flopping on that side of the House, how do Canadians believe anything these folks say?
That time he didn't say the 8 out of 10 statistic. That might be the first time he's stood up to spoken, that he's not used it. Oh, man. Damn. He just stands there like a zombie.
The Honourable Member from Kenora.
What's the point?
Mr. Speaker, the simple fact is that this government's plan just isn't working. They continue to miss climate target after climate target. They're only driving up the cost of living for Canadians. And in Northern Ontario, we cannot afford to pay more for gas and home heating. But the Liberal and NDP politicians across Northern Ontario continue to leave their residents out in the cold. So I will ask again, will we see in today's mini budget a plan from this government to finally cancel their carbon tax hikes?
More carbon tax. Does that make sense to anybody out there? Like putting more carbon tax out there?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to correct a record. The Harper government didn't meet any of the environmental targets that they have. We are on track, 85% to meet our 2030 targets. We have 6 years left, Mr. Speaker, to get there, and we will meet the interim 2026 targets. We are meeting our targets when it comes to climate change, when it comes to protecting nature, when it comes to phasing out plastic pollution. They don't believe in any of this, Mr. Speaker. They want to increase pollution in Canada, not on this side of the House. We're working for Canadians, for the health of Canadians, for the future of our kids and grandkids, Mr. Speaker.
Did you see that Sean Fraser was waving at somebody? Did you see that?
L'honorable député de Bellechasse, les Etchemins Lévis.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Banque
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Scotiabank experts have calculated that the government overspending adds 2 percentage points to interest rates in Canada, and it's Canadians who are struggling to pay their mortgage rates that are paying the price. This government has never tabled a balanced budget.
She always shoots this funny look at the end.
To balance the budget today so that interest rates can come down and Canadians can stay in their homes.
Well, she didn't do it that time. And so I guess I shouldn't say she always. Very often she shoots a funny look.
Secretary. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives who try to blame the federal government for inflation have a difficult task ahead of them. The report that my colleague is quoting says that COVID supports and government expenditures from provincial governments are responsible for these increases, not federal government expenditures. My colleague is a former member of the Quebec Legislative Assembly. Is she saying that we should demand that provinces spend less? Is that her conclusion?
Just turning it back on the provinces there.
With respect, I'll bring her back to reality. The economic situation is such that a young man from Sherbrooke has to spend winter in a tent because there's no access to affordable housing. The costly Liberal Bloc coalition wants to radically increase the carbon tax, which is going to raise the price of everything. It costs a lot to vote for the Bloc. We're asking the government to cancel carbon tax increases, balance the budget, build housing, and not bureaucracy. Will the Minister of Finance disappoint, rather surprise us and balance the budget and give us some hope?
Oh, she didn't do it again. That's weird.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. What's disappointing for many people watching us is to see that the member who once defended carbon pricing, who stood up for fighting climate change, has flip-flopped and now is part of a party that no longer believes in climate change, doesn't believe in protecting the environment for our children and grandchildren. That's what Canadians find disappointing.
L'honorable député de Drummond. Monsieur le Président, nos médias.
Mr. Speaker, our media are in crisis. Yesterday,
Martin Champeau's
the head of
always
Quebecor
about
said
the media.
that TVA is being pushed to the limit.
TVA,
Media's vice
Blue
president
Nuit.
said, the longer we wait, the more we put ourselves at risk and the more we expose ourselves to losing sources of information. Meanwhile, what did the minister say? We hope that by 2025, we'll have a new regulatory framework. 2025. Our media outlets are in danger now. 2 years from now is too late. What's the minister waiting for? The Honourable Minister for Canadian Heritage.
Pascal
As my
Sanon.
colleague knows, since the media crisis started in Canada, the government has been there to set up tax credits, among other measures, programs which did not exist before. We will continue to do so. We've now provided all the tools to the CRTC required to adapt to the regulatory framework to today's reality, especially to ensure that web giants pay their fair share and participate in the success of our Canadian businesses and creating Canadian content. We will continue to work in partnership with all representatives of the media industry. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Drummond. Monsieur le Président, C11, C18, c'est des...
Mr. Speaker, C11 and C18 are good ideas, but they're not working. Until negotiations with web giants are concluded on C18, we need an emergency fund for our media. I think it's reasonable. And it's essential to maintain the diversity of information sources in the short term. In the long term, we'll need a lot more, but right now, we can send a clear message that we're ready to act to save our media. Will the minister quickly set up an emergency fund before there's more closures in the news media world? The Honourable Minister for Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his question. The Bloc Québécois is among the parties who, unlike the Conservatives, participated in making sure that legislation for news online and for modernizing the Radio Broadcasting Act passed. That's why the CRTC is getting ready to set up a new regulatory framework. Over the next few months and years, a lot of work will be done. One thing is sure is that unlike the Conservatives, we've always been there to support our creators and our artists and will continue to do so.
Interesting.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost. The Liberal-appointed chair of the Green Slush Fund resigned in disgrace after it was revealed that she funneled more than $200,000 of taxpayers' money into her company. An independent report reveals that this just scratches the surface of corruption at the foundation. So how many more Liberal insiders have used the Green Slush Fund to line their pockets?
World Liberal Green Slush Fund. You're going to hear more about that, I'm guessing, in the next couple of weeks.
Minister for Innovation.
Thank you very
Piques
much, Mr.
interest.
Speaker. And
I'm sure that Canadians who are watching this member are wondering what he's saying again, Mr. Speaker. Let me bring facts to the story. Mr. Speaker, from the moment we heard of allegation, we commissioned to have an independent investigation. We froze the fund of the institution, Mr. Speaker. We accepted
They're afraid
the
to freeze
resignation of the
funds.
chair. The CEO has resigned, Mr. Speaker. We're going to go to the bottom of this, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to continue to help the companies in our country, Mr. Speaker.
FPC is having trouble there with his
Ask all
words.
members to please
Come on,
keep their
Greg.
comments limited to the person who is asking questions or the person who is answering them. The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton, now has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, the independent report revealed that multiple board members voted to funnel money from the fund to companies that they had an interest in. This is scandalous. In the face of evidence of self-dealing and corruption, the minister has not seen fit to fire anyone. Why? Which Liberal insiders is he protecting? Why?
Protecting all the Liberal insiders, perhaps.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Thank you very much, Mr.
gonna
Speaker.
flip,
And you know
maybe.
what is scandalous, Mr. Speaker? Is these conservative making claims, Mr. Speaker, making allegations against people, Mr. Speaker. What a responsible government does, Mr. Speaker, is when there's allegation, we investigate. That's exactly what we did, Mr. Speaker. We suspended the financing of the organization. The CEO has resigned. We have accepted the resignation of the chair, Mr. Speaker. We're going to go to the bottom of this, but we're going to continue to help companies in this country. We invest in green technologies, Mr. Speaker.
Encore une fois, j'espère que tous les députés.
Once again, I hope that all members will take the time to listen to the member who asked the question and listen to the answer as well. The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years of this Liberal government,
Gerard's pretty good.
unfortunately, a personality trait of this government is ethics problems.
Always French, though,
Recently,
every time.
there was the $1 billion Green Fund. The Auditor General is investigating $40 million in mismanaged funds. The chair of that organization paid herself $200,000, funneling it to her own company. The Canadians who are listening to us want a clear answer from the government. How and when is this government going to hold these people accountable and pay back the money that these people used to help out their own little Liberal friends?
It is a good question.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation. As you know, I have a great deal of respect for my colleague for Saint Laurent. He's an honourable man. But today, the people in Saint Laurent must be asking questions because he knows full well what the government is doing. As soon as allegations were made, we demanded an independent verification to get to the bottom of things. We suspended the organization's funds. The CEO of the organization resigned. The chair of the board of directors also resigned. We're going to continue to help Canadian companies while we handle this.
L'honorable député de Madawaska-Restigouche.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether it be in the lovely region of Madawaska or Restigouche, which are the most beautiful in the country, the tourism industry continues to draw
I'm from
tourism
Guysborough,
to
Nova
every
Scotia,
corner of
and
our
it's
country.
beautiful there.
The tourism industry represents an important opportunity for growth. So much so that the World Travel and Tourism Council predicts that tourism's contribution to Canada's GDP could double by 2033. It's a golden opportunity. Can the Minister of Tourism tell us how our government is supporting Canadian tourism to continue to grow and attract more visitors?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable
I don't
Minister.
like when they do the tee-ups.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is right. Tourism represents 1.9 billion jobs. It's represented in every location throughout the country and generates $266 million a day. Yesterday, we launched the Tourism Growth Program, $108 million. That's going to be delivered through local economic agencies. These investments will support businesses and organizations to help them grow and provide authentic tourism experiences. This is an essential part of our Canadian economy.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
This NDP Liberal
All right.
government spent
You're a genius.
$54 million on
Haven't
the
seen her in a
Orion
while.
app, and now RCMP are investigating contractors. More evidence that after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Now, two senior public servants have accused each other of lying about who made the decision to hire GC Strategies. GC Strategies is a two-man company that does nothing and that subcontracts all the actual work. So will the minister responsible for this decision stand up now and explain to the House why GC Strategies was chosen?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm happy to explain to the House is how seriously our government takes allegations of inappropriate behavior with taxpayers' money and contracting or subcontracting. We're obviously very pleased that the committee is looking into this matter. We're pleased that the Auditor General is also seized with this question. And we're also pleased, Mr. Speaker, that the Canadian Border Services Agency, when these issues came to light, took the appropriate action in internal reviews and, as was appropriate, referred any and all of these circumstances to the appropriate authorities.
I don't know what I think about
The honourable
Dominic
member from
LeBlanc.
South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Somebody tell me what to think
South
about
Korea's
Dominic
ambassador
LeBlanc.
told Windsor
I know
officials
Rick.
that the auto giant Stellantis will employ 1,600 workers from South Korea, not Canada, at the $15 billion subsidized battery plant. Every mom on a minimum wage, every couple struggling to pay their mortgage, every union assembly line worker will each pay $1,000 in taxes to subsidize these foreign workers. After 8 years, this Prime Minister's not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister ensure that all jobs at the Stellantis plant go to Canadian paychecks, not foreign workers?
Looks like a lot of money going to be going towards foreign workers with that
Minister
Stellantis
for
plant.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from these conservatives.
We'll take no lessons from these conservatives. He says that a lot.
People of Windsor, they have done nothing for the workers, Mr. Speaker, and they have certainly done nothing for auto sector, Mr. Speaker. One thing that we have done, Mr. Speaker, is to maximize opportunities for Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And let me give him some news. The CEO of the company just confirmed that there will be 2,500 Canadian workers at the plant and up to 2,300 to build the plant, Mr. Speaker. This is what I call working for Canadians.
I can't help but think that he possibly can make an interesting opposition leader. I would never want him to be Prime Minister, but an opposition leader, he brings a lot of fire when he's speaking. Sometimes.
Order.
It's very dramatic, like
The honourable member
funny
from
way of
Dufferin
talking.
Caledon.
This minister should take a lesson from just about anyone willing
Seaback
to
is
give it,
great.
and I'll tell you why. The unemployment rate in Windsor is 7%. They're bringing in 1,600 workers from Korea. And this plant is going to cost $1,000 per Canadian family. Every unemployed union worker in Windsor could have this job. Instead, these incompetent, arrogant liberals give the job to 1,600
Slinging mud.
Koreans. Will the minister promise right now the jobs will go to hardworking Canadians, not workers from any other country, including Korea?
Seaback is fun too. Him and Mike Barrett, I find, are very similar. They go really hard in the paint. They ask their questions with a lot of gusto.
Speaker, I'm sure Canadians are shocked to hear this member again repeating falsehood, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know, Mr. Speaker, not to trust these conservatives when it comes to jobs, when it comes to growth, when it comes to the auto sector, Mr. Speaker. Let me repeat so he can write down the number. 2,500 jobs at the plant, Mr. Speaker. Up to 2,300 to build the plant, Mr. Speaker. That's what the CEO has said. That's what we're going to do, Mr. Speaker. We're going to build opportunity for Canadians.
Can you not see what I mean? That he does bring a lot of gusto in his responses, and I think he would bring a similar energy if he was always like in the role of the opposition, where you can be very aggressive and just not have to defend anything.
The honourable
Come
member
on,
from
Brad.
Halifax.
Oh, Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, this past weekend,
I know this clown.
leaders, parliamentarians,
He's been to my
and
house.
senior
He's been,
military
like,
personnel
where
from
we
the
are
world's
right now.
democracies gathered in
got
my
a story.
hometown of Halifax for the 15th annual
How do I do this?
Halifax International Security Forum. We came together for meaningful discussions of international security, defense, the role of women in peacekeeping, the threats of climate change, and so much more.
Okay, I got to tell a quick story about Andy Fillmore just briefly. In 2015, during that election, he was running in the election, and he stops by my house. I had bought the place like within 2 or 3 days. I had just moved here. And then he's looking at my land, and he's like, is this all your land? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, this is a good part of the city to have land. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, can I put a sign on your property? And I was like, no, you can't. I'm new to this neighborhood. I'm not advertising that I'm a liberal, like, because I'm not a liberal. Anyhow, next day, there's this huge 12 by 8 liberal sign in the corner of my property. I flipped out because I don't want to be associated when I'm in a new neighborhood by advertising for a political blah, blah, blah. They came and they got it within a half hour, but I had to call their office, and I was quite upset. Anyhow, back to Andy Fillmore. Sorry for the interruption, guys, but that happened in real life.
Discussions of international security, defense, the role of women in peacekeeping, the threats of climate change, and so much more. Mr. Speaker, could the Minister of National Defense
First time I've seen him
share
since.
with this House the important work that was done over the past several days in Halifax?
Great question.
Yeah, he asked me if he could put up a sign. I said no. He put up the sign.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Halifax not only for his great question, but also for his terrific hospitality. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, last weekend we welcomed world leaders and a terrific contingent of Canadian parliamentarians to the largest defense conference of democracies, the Halifax International Security Forum. And Mr. Speaker, this was not only a shining moment for Canada, but it was a great day for the city of Halifax because I had the opportunity to announce $26 million to establish the NATO Defense Innovation Accelerator and, Mr. Speaker, $188 million for a new training center for CFB Halifax, Canada's largest military base. Mr. Speaker, it was a terrific weekend for Canada's national defense and for the great city of Halifax. The honourable member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, the window to address runaway climate change is rapidly closing, and as the Environment Commissioner clearly laid out, far too many of this Liberal government's climate strategies are falling far short of what is required. Now we learn that the Greener Homes program, the federal fund that allows homeowners to retrofit their homes and install heat pumps, is already running out of money. So will the minister commit to not only renewing this program's funding, but also fixing it so it finally works for low-income homeowners?
Hear, hear.
Don't worry, Taylor Backrat. The free heat pumps will solve all the problems.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly, enhancing building efficiency is extremely important in the fight against climate change and in the appropriate utilization of our natural resources. Certainly, we put into place a number of programs, including the oil to heat pump program, but also the Green Buildings program, which actually provides a $5,000 grant to Canadians to improve the energy efficiency of their home. The #1 implementation is heat pumps. We sourced money for that program. It has been enormously popular. We will continue to actually receive applications, and of course, we are going to look, as every program, at the results and what we will do to supplement those things on a go-forward basis.
The honourable member
Seems
from
worn
Nanaimo,
out. Jonathan Wilkinson
Mr.
seems
Speaker,
tired.
Canada's leading humanitarian aid agencies have united together to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. People in Nanaimo Ladysmith are demanding action from the federal government.
What are we going to do about
Be
Gaza?
released and a ceasefire declared so that no more children are killed. But this Prime Minister doesn't seem to recognize that the killing of over 13,000 innocent civilians and more than 1.7 million displaced is an atrocity, and it must end now. So I will ask you again, when will the Prime Minister call for a ceasefire?
Yeah. Do you think it makes a big difference in Gaza if Canada's declaring that we want a ceasefire? Do you think they
Minister for Global Affairs.
can't imagine it would register?
Of course, we've seen horrific scenes on October 7 when Hamas attacked innocent Israelis. And of course, we also know that Gaza is one of the worst places on earth to live in right now. So we need to make sure that all civilians are protected. We need to make sure, as well as humanitarian aid, can
Not enough substance.
be sent to Gaza. We are seeing that right now there are negotiations happening between Israel, between Hamas, brokered by Qatar, and we look forward to seeing
She did
all
good to remember the
hostages
names of all
released
those
and
places.
humanitarian aid allowed to Gaza.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that, unfortunately, brings
Well,
us
well,
to
well,
an end
guys.
question period for the day.
That brings us to the end
I
of
do
question
see rising
period
on a point of order.
for today. So that's interesting. It's fun. Trudeau showed up. It is more fun when he's there. Easy to make fun of. Poilievre seems to enjoy his questions more when he gets to ask them straight to Trudeau. But that's it, guys. I'm Aaron. This is Question Period Canada. We're having fun. I'm doing a program now, or a show where I put this up in just the highlights. No more translators, no more Greg Fergus, just the information in a concentrated dose of political entertainment and interest in just the story of what actually happens on a daily basis at Question Period. It's smooth. It flows smoothly, unlike I'm doing right now. We're going to get going. Thank you all for watching. My name's Aaron, Question Period Canada. Like and subscribe. We're having fun here with Canadian politics. It's great. We'll catch you next time. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good night, everyone.